As a little girl, Krista Adler devoured fairy tales, dreaming of princesses trapped in towers and charming princes galloping through dark forests to save them. But as explosions rocked the First Trust Bank, tear gas stung her eyes, and the robbers' roars deafened her ears, she learned the truth. Real life held no castles. Only a frigid vault, a gun pressed to her temple, and her heart thundering, screaming one name: Mathew. Who was he? The stranger she'd saved in a wild chase. Could he reach her before the trigger pulled? Buckle up for a tale of courage and secrets that'll grip you till the end. What twists await Krista? Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest stories and share where you're tuning in from, day or night. Will her daring spark love or doom? Stick around to find out. The Atlanta dusk draped the city in a haze of amber and shadow, the air thick with the drone of cicadas and the faint tang of exhaust. Krista Adler, 26, slumped into the driver's seat of her battered Corolla, its engine coughing like a smoker's rasp. Her shift at First Trust Bank had been a gauntlet: endless deposits, a manager's snide remarks, and a customer's lingering sneer at her dark skin. She tossed her purse onto the passenger seat, her hazel eyes catching the last glint of sunlight in the rearview mirror. Her braid, tight and practical, swung as she adjusted the mirror, willing the day's weight to slip away. Just get home, she thought. Just breathe. A thud shattered the quiet, the car rocking as the back door flew open. A man dove into the back seat, his leather jacket scraping the torn upholstery. "Drive now!" His voice was a blade, sharp and smooth, laced with a mocking edge that made her skin prickle. Krista froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. In the dim light, his face was all angles: high cheekbones, a jawline that could carve stone, and green eyes glinting with urgency. His dark hair, tousled, fell over a brow furrowed with focus. "What the hell?" Krista's voice cracked, her hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. "No time! Go!" he barked, ducking low, his body coiled like a spring. The roar of motorcycles tore through the parking lot, their headlights slicing the twilight. Krista's eyes darted to the mirror. Three hulking figures, hooded in black, astride snarling bikes, their engines a primal growl. The Iron Vipers, though she didn't know their name yet, radiated menace, their silhouettes looming like predators. "Who are you?" she stammered, her foot hovering over the gas. Fear clawed her throat, but his gaze locked onto hers, steady despite the chaos. "Mathew Husond, move, or we're both dead." His tone, dripping sarcasm, carried an infuriating calm. "Unless you want to chat with those charming fellows back there." Krista's mind raced, every instinct screaming to bolt from the car. But the bikes were closing, their lights blinding in the mirror. Her hands trembled, but she slammed the gas, the Corolla lurching forward with a groan. The tires squealed, gravel spitting as she peeled out of the lot, her pulse a frantic drumbeat. "Left at the light," Mathew snapped, his voice cutting through her panic. He leaned forward, one hand braced on the seat, his breath hot against her ear. "Lose 'em in the alleys." Krista swerved, the car rattling as it dove into a narrow street, storefronts blurring past. The Vipers' roars grew louder, their bikes weaving like wolves on the hunt. She glanced at the mirror. Two were gaining, their hooded faces unreadable, one raising a gloved hand as if signaling. Her stomach twisted. What had she stumbled into? "Focus, rookie," Mathew said, his mockery laced with urgency. "Right turn, now." She yanked the wheel, the Corolla skidding into an alley, its frame shuddering. Dumpsters loomed, their shadows flickering under flickering streetlights. The bikes followed, relentless, their engines a deafening howl. Krista's palms sweated, the wheel slick under her grip. She wasn't a racer, just a bank teller who'd never outrun so much as a traffic ticket. Yet here she was, threading a needle through Atlanta's underbelly, guided by a stranger who sounded like he was enjoying this. "Who are they?" she demanded, her voice high as she dodged a stray crate. The alley narrowed, brick walls closing in. "Bad guys, really bad drivers," Mathew quipped, but his eyes, scanning the mirrors, were deadly serious. "Keep going. Left up ahead." Krista's breath hitched as she swung left, the car scraping a dumpster with a screech. The Vipers were close. One bike surged forward, its rider leaning low, the glint of metal in his hand. A gun? Her heart lurched, but Mathew's hand grazed her shoulder. A fleeting anchor. "You got this," he said, voice low, steady. The touch, brief as it was, sparked something. Focus, defiance, a flicker of trust she didn't understand. The alley opened into a maze of back streets, neon signs casting eerie glows. Krista's knuckles whitened, her mind a blur of fear and adrenaline. The Corolla groaned, its engine protesting, but she pushed it harder, weaving through turns as Mathew directed. "Right, straight, sharp left." His commands were precise, his calm a lifeline in the chaos. A Viper's bike roared alongside, its rider's hood whipping in the wind. The Corolla's bumper shuddered as the bike grazed it, the impact jarring Krista's arms. She gasped, the car swerving, inches from a brick wall. "Hold it steady," Mathew growled, leaning out the window, his jacket flapping. He hurled a soda can, left in the back seat from her lunch, striking the rider's helmet. The Viper wobbled, falling back, but the others pressed closer. "Seriously? A can?" Krista snapped, her fear boiling into anger. "Improv," Mathew shot back, smirking. "Now floor it." She did, the Corolla screaming as it burst onto a wider street, streetlights blurring into streaks. Mathew's directions led her through a final loop, a dizzying spiral of turns that left the Viper's roars fading. She pulled into a dim, empty lot behind a shuttered warehouse, the engine ticking as she killed it. Silence crashed in, broken only by her ragged breaths and the distant hum of the city. Mathew exhaled, sprawling across the back seat like he owned it. "Well, damn, we're alive. Nice driving, rookie." His grin was infuriatingly charming, his eyes glinting with something like respect. Krista spun, her face flushed with fury and fear. "Who are you? A thief? A drug dealer?" Her voice shook, sweat beading her brow. He chuckled, climbing out, his lean frame unfolding with easy grace. "If I was a crook, sweetheart, you'd be in a ditch, not yelling at me." He leaned against the door, all swagger, his jacket creaking. "Let's just say I'm in a complicated line of work." She opened her mouth to argue, but he cut her off, his tone softening, almost sincere. "You saved my ass tonight. Thanks for that." He straightened, his gaze holding hers a beat too long, stirring a flutter she didn't want. "Catch you later, hero." With a mock salute, he turned, his boots crunching gravel as he melted into the shadows. Krista sat frozen, her hand still clutching the wheel, the lot's silence pressing in. Her heart pounded, not just from the chase, but from the weight of his presence. Dangerous, magnetic, gone. The Viper's roars echoed in her mind, their menace lingering like a storm cloud. She didn't know Mathew Husond, didn't know why he dragged her into this. But as she restarted the car, its engine sputtering, one thing was clear. Her night, her life, had just veered into the unknown. The Atlanta night pulsed with a restless energy, its skyline a mosaic of neon and starlight. Krista Adler slumped on her apartment's sagging couch, the faint hum of a distant siren seeping through the cracked window. Her hands, still trembling from the afternoon's chaos, clutched a lukewarm glass of water. The memory of roaring motorcycles and a stranger's mocking voice lingered like smoke, curling in her mind. She'd barely dodged questions from her roommate, Nia Carter, a whirlwind of curls and enthusiasm who now stood before her, hands on hips. "Girl, you look like you got dragged through a horror flick," Nia said, her voice bright but probing. "What's up? Spill?" Krista forced a smile, her hazel eyes dodging Nia's gaze. "Just a long day at the bank, same old." She couldn't explain the man, Mathew he'd called himself, or the terror of outrunning those hooded bikers. Not without sounding unhinged. Nia's brow furrowed, but she waved a hand, undeterred. "No moping tonight. We're hitting Vibe Lounge. New spot, hot vibes, hotter bartenders." She tugged Krista's arm, her grin infectious. "You need to live a little." Krista groaned, her body aching for sleep, but Nia's insistence was a force of nature. An hour later, she found herself in a sleek black dress, her braids swapped for loose waves that brushed her shoulders. Vibe Lounge loomed ahead, its facade a glow of violet neon, bass thumping like a heartbeat. The crowd spilled onto the sidewalk, hipsters in vintage tees, suits with loosened ties, and shadowy figures whispering in corners. Krista's stomach churned, a flicker of unease stirring, but Nia dragged her inside, her laughter cutting through the din. The bar was a sensory assault. Strobe lights danced across mirrored walls, jazz-infused hip-hop pulsed, and the air carried a mix of perfume and whiskey. Krista perched on a stool at the counter, Nia already flirting with a waiter in a corner booth. She scanned the room, her nerves raw, half expecting those hooded bikers to emerge from the shadows. The bar's energy felt alive, electric, but tinged with something darker, like a secret hum beneath the chatter. A voice smooth as velvet and edged with mischief snapped her focus. "Well, if it ain't my guardian angel." Krista's head whipped around, her breath catching. Mathew Husond leaned across the bar, his bartender's apron doing little to hide the broad lines of his shoulders. His green eyes sparkled, that infuriating grin curling his lips. His dark hair, slicked back, gleamed under the lights, and his sleeves, rolled to the elbows, revealed forearms corded with muscle. He was a walking contradiction, danger wrapped in charm. "You work here?" Krista blurted, her voice sharper than intended. Her cheeks warmed, the memory of his hand on her shoulder flashing unbidden. "Best cocktails in town," he said, sliding a vibrant drink her way, its citrus tang sharp against the bar's smoky haze. "On the house. Call it a thank you for earlier." His wink was lethal, but his gaze held a warmth that disarmed her. She sipped the drink, surprised by its crisp perfection. "This is good. My signature, the runaway." He leaned closer, elbows on the bar, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Fits you, don't it? Krista Adler, bank teller by day, wheelman by dusk." She bristled, but a smile tugged her lips. "And you? What's your deal, Mathew? Besides dodging creeps on bikes?" He chuckled, dodging the question with practiced ease. "Just a guy who mixes drinks and stays out of trouble. Mostly." His eyes flicked to the side, and Krista followed his gaze. In a dim corner, he was speaking to a wiry man with a shaved head, their voices low, tense. "Tell your boss I'm in, but I need time," Mathew said, his tone clipped. The man's eyes darted to Krista, narrowing, and her pulse quickened. Mathew laughed, loud and false, clapping the man's shoulder to steer him away. "What was that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease curling in her gut. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said, flashing that grin again. "Occupational hazard. You're safe, I promise." His sincerity, fleeting but real, softened her defenses. The bar's rhythm swept them up, their banter flowing like the jazz overhead. Mathew proposed a game, his eyes glinting with challenge. "Guess the runaway's ingredients. Get it right, and I'll answer one question. Truthfully. Deal?" Krista arched a brow, intrigued despite herself. "Deal." She sipped again, parsing the flavors. Lime, gin, a hint of mint. "Gin, lime, mint, and soda?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Close, but no cigar. Better luck next time, detective." His teasing nickname sent a flush through her, and she couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the day easing. Nia reappeared, her eyes wide. "Krista, you're glowing. Who's this?" She eyed Mathew, her grin sly. "Mathew," he said, extending a hand. "Your friend's got a knack for saving my hide." Nia's brows shot up, but Krista waved her off. "Long story." Nia smirked, whispering, "He's trouble. The hot kind." She sauntered back to her waiter, leaving Krista with Mathew's gaze, warm and unwavering. The bar grew louder, the crowd thicker, but their corner felt like a bubble, charged with an unspoken pull. Mathew's fingers brushed hers as he took her empty glass, the contact sparking a jolt she didn't expect. "So," he said, his voice low, "how about a number, in case I need another getaway driver?" Krista hesitated, her practical side warring with the flutter in her chest. He was a mystery, tied to something dangerous. She felt it in the air, in that corner argument, but his charm, his quiet gratitude tugged at her. She typed her number into his phone, her fingers steady despite the heat in her cheeks. "Don't make me regret this," she said, half serious. "Wouldn't dream of it," he replied, his grin softening into something genuine. He pocketed the phone, his eyes holding hers a moment longer before a customer's shout pulled him away. Krista sat back, the runaway's tang lingering on her tongue, the bar's pulse syncing with her own. Vibe Lounge hummed with secrets, and Mathew was at its heart, a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. As Nia dragged her toward the dance floor, Krista glanced back, catching Mathew's gaze across the crowd. He raised a glass, a silent toast, and she felt it, a spark, dangerous and bright, igniting in the neon night. Krista Adler navigated her days with a new rhythm, her routine of bank ledgers and curt managers now punctuated by stolen moments with Mathew Husond. Their encounters, coffee at dawn, late-night diner runs, stolen glances under jazz club lights, wove a thread of anticipation through her life. Each meeting chipped away at her wariness, his sharp wit and fleeting sincerity drawing her closer, though questions about his world lingered like shadows. Tonight, the city hummed with possibility as Krista stepped into a candlelit bistro, her navy blouse catching the glow of fairy lights strung across the patio. Mathew waited at a corner table, his tailored jacket slung over the chair, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar to reveal a glimpse of tanned skin. His green eyes lit up as she approached, that familiar grin curling his lips. "Took you long enough, Adler," he teased, standing to pull out her chair. "Thought I'd have to send a search party." Krista rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her. "Some of us have jobs that don't involve charming strangers." She settled into the seat, the scent of rosemary and grilled steak mingling with the cool night air. Their conversation flowed, a dance of his sarcasm and her earnestness. He quizzed her on her favorite jazz. "Ella Fitzgerald," she admitted, earning a mock gasp. "No Coltrane? I'm wounded." She countered with a question about his worst bar shift, coaxing a story of a spilled tray and a drunk patron's karaoke disaster. Laughter came easily, but beneath it, Krista sensed a guarded edge, a part of him held back. The mood shifted when the manager, a wiry man with a pinched face, approached their table. His eyes lingered on Krista, a flicker of disdain crossing his features. "This area is reserved for preferred guests," he said, his tone clipped, the implication clear. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar." Krista's stomach tightened, the sting of his words cutting deep. She opened her mouth, but Mathew's hand shot up, his charm vanishing like a snuffed flame. "Say that again," he said, voice low, icy. He stood, towering over the manager, his frame radiating menace. "Apologize to her, now, or I'll have your name on every review site by morning." The manager faltered, his bravado crumbling under Mathew's stare. I meant no offense," he stammered, retreating with a muttered apology. Krista exhaled, her hands unclenching, gratitude and something warmer flooding her chest. Mathew sat, his expression softening. "Nobody talks to you like that," he said, his voice quiet but fierce. "Not while I'm around." She nodded, her throat tight. "Thanks," she whispered, the moment sealing a trust she hadn't realized was growing. Days later, a jazz club downtown became their refuge. Its smoky ambiance and saxophone wails a backdrop to their deepening bond. Krista, in a burgundy dress that hugged her curves, sipped a soda. Matthew's teasing about her teetotaler ways earned a playful swat. They swayed to the music, his hand light on her waist, when a prickle of unease crawled up her spine. Across the room, a man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck watched them, his eyes cold, familiar. She froze, recognizing the hulking build from that frantic afternoon, weeks ago. "Mathew," she murmured, nodding toward the man. "He's one of them, isn't he?" Matthew's jaw tightened, but he steered her toward the bar, his voice casual. "Just a guy who can't dance. Ignore him." His grip was firm, protective, but the lie hung heavy. Krista's unease grew, the club's warmth souring. Later, as they shared a booth, Matthew's phone buzzed, its screen lighting up with a cryptic message. "Viper meet 2 a.m. He angled it away, but not before Krista caught the words. "Late shift?" she asked, her tone probing. "Yeah, bar stuff," he said, too quickly, his eyes avoiding hers. The deflection stung, a reminder of the secrets he kept. She wanted to press, but his hand brushed hers, a silent plea for trust, and she let it go, the jazz drowning her doubts. Their nights blurred into weeks, each date peeling back layers. At a riverside diner, Krista opened up, her voice soft against the clink of plates. "The bank's been hell," she admitted. "They did an audit last week, and my manager pinned a glitch on me. Said I missed a deposit. I didn't, but—" She trailed off, the weight of unspoken prejudice heavy. "It's like I'm always proving I belong." Matthew's jaw clenched, his usual jest gone. "You're tougher than they know," he said, his voice steady. "They don't deserve you." His words, simple but fierce, anchored her, a balm to the bruises of her days. Yet the shadows persisted. At a rooftop cafe, Matthew's laughter faltered when another message pinged. "Vipers moving soon." He pocketed the phone, but Krista caught the tension in his shoulders. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Just work," he said, his smile strained. "Nothing I can't handle." But the air between them shifted, a crack in their ease. As they walked through Atlanta's twinkling streets, Matthew's arm brushed hers, his presence a quiet strength. Krista felt the pull, his charm, his protection, the mystery that both drew and unsettled her. She didn't know his world, didn't know the danger he courted, but each moment with him felt like a step towards something real, something worth risking. The city's pulse thrummed around them, a promise of revelations yet to come. And Krista, for the first time, let herself lean into the unknown, her heart open to the man who'd already changed her stars. The Atlanta morning broke with a deceptive calm, sunlight spilling through the glass facade of First Trust Bank, casting long shadows across its marble floors. Krista Adler stood behind the teller counter, her fingers swift over the keyboard, processing a stack of withdrawals with mechanical precision. The hum of fluorescent lights and the murmur of customers filled the air, but her mind was elsewhere, tangled in the orbit of Mathew Husond. His laughter, his fierce defense, the cryptic messages flickering across his phone, they haunted her, a puzzle she couldn't solve. Each date had drawn her deeper, yet his secrets loomed like a storm on the horizon, threatening the fragile trust they'd built. At 10:47 a.m., her phone buzzed in her pocket, a quiet vibration against the monotony. She glanced at her manager, a stern woman with a perpetual frown, before slipping the device out. Matthew's name glowed on the screen, and her pulse quickened. His texts were usually playful, laced with that infuriating charm, but this was a call. She ducked behind a partition, her voice low. "Matthew, everything okay?" "Krista, listen." His voice was taut, stripped of its usual mockery, a raw edge cutting through. "You need to get out of the bank. Now. Walk away, don't look back." Her stomach lurched, the words landing like a blow. "What? Why? I'm in the middle of a shift. No time. Just trust me. Please." The urgency in his tone was a cold hand on her spine. "Get to the parking lot. I'm on my way." "Matthew, what's going on?" Her voice rose, drawing a sharp glance from a coworker, Tanya Reed, who was sorting cash nearby. Krista lowered it, her heart hammering. "You can't just—" The line went dead. She stared at the phone, its blank screen mocking her confusion. Trust him? After weeks of half-truths, of dodged questions? Yet his voice, stripped bare, echoed with a fear she hadn't heard before. Her fingers tightened around the phone, indecision warring with instinct. She thought of his hand on hers, his vow that no one would hurt her. Against her better judgment, she slipped the phone back into her pocket, her eyes darting to the bank's entrance. Maybe she could step out, claim a break. The doors exploded inward, glass shattering in a deafening cascade. Screams erupted as 5 masked men stormed the lobby, their black tactical gear stark against the morning light. Guns gleamed in their gloved hands, barrels sweeping the room like predators' eyes. Customers dove to the floor, tellers froze, and Krista's breath caught, her body rooted behind the counter. The leader, a towering figure with a skull-etched mask, strode forward, his voice a guttural roar. "Nobody moves! Hands up now!" Krista's hands shot up, trembling, her pulse a frantic drumbeat. Tanya beside her whimpered, her eyes wide with terror. The leader, Reaper, she'd later learn, swung his gun toward the tellers, his mask's empty sockets locking onto Krista. "You!" he barked, pointing. "Open the vault! Move it!" Her mind blanked, Mathew's warning ringing in her ears. "Get out! Too late!" The bank was a cage, the air thick with panic and the metallic scent of fear. Customers sobbed. A security guard lay sprawled, disarmed, his radio crackling uselessly. Krista's gaze flicked to the back of the lobby, where a service door led to the storage room, a narrow escape route to the alley. If she could reach it. But Reaper's gun was a cold promise, and her legs felt like lead. Tanya's hand grazed hers under the counter, a desperate clutch. "Krista, do what they say," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please." Krista swallowed, her throat dry as ash. Mathew's voice echoed, "Trust me." But he wasn't here. She was, and every second mattered. "We have to stall," she murmured, barely audible, her eyes locked on Tanya's. "Keep them talking." Tanya's face paled, but she nodded, a flicker of resolve in her tear-streaked eyes. Krista straightened, forcing her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "The vault's on a timer," she said, loud enough for Reaper to hear. "It takes 5 minutes to unlock. I can't rush it." Reaper's mask tilted, his silence menacing. He stepped closer, the gun's barrel inches from her face, its cold steel a whisper of death. "Don't play games, girl," he growled. "Open it, or I'll start with her." He jerked his head toward Tanya, who stifled a sob. Krista's heart pounded, but she held his gaze, her mind racing. 5 minutes. Long enough for help to arrive? She didn't know Mathew's plan, didn't know if he was coming, but stalling was her only weapon. "I'm trying," she said, moving toward the vault with deliberate slowness, her fingers fumbling at the keypad. The other robbers fanned out, barking orders, shoving customers into a corner. A woman clutched her child, their whimpers piercing the air. As Krista punched in the code, her eyes darted to the service door again. It was hidden behind a stack of file boxes, accessible only through the storage room. If she could lead them there, distract them. "There's a secondary lock," she lied, her voice steadying. "It's in the back. I need to check it." Reaper's gun pressed against her shoulder, a warning. "No tricks," he snarled, but he nodded to a second robber, a lean figure with a crowbar tattooed on his wrist. "Go with her." Krista's breath hitched as she led the way, the robber's boots heavy behind her. Tanya followed, her hands still raised, her eyes pleading. The storage room was a maze of crates and paper stacks, the service door barely visible in the dim light. Krista's mind churned. Mathew's urgency a lifeline. "He's coming." She had to believe it. "Move faster," the robber snapped, shoving her toward a dummy panel she'd pointed out. Krista knelt, pretending to fiddle with a non-existent lock, her fingers brushing the dusty floor. "It's stuck," she said, buying seconds, her voice calm despite the sweat beading her brow. Tanya, trembling beside her, whispered, "What are you doing?" "Trust me," Krista mouthed, her eyes flicking to the service door. "There's a way out. Back there." She nodded subtly, praying Tanya understood. If they could slip through, alert someone. But the robber's gun was trained on her, and Reaper's shouts echoed from the lobby, demanding progress. The clock in Krista's head ticked down, each second a gamble. She didn't know Mathew's world, didn't know the stakes he was playing, but his voice, raw, desperate, had ignited something in her. Courage, defiance, a refusal to break. She rose, feigning frustration. "The lock's jammed. I need a tool from the desk." The robber hesitated, then grabbed her arm, dragging her back to the lobby. Krista's eyes met Tanya's, a silent pact forming. Stall. Survive. Reaper loomed by the vault, his mask a specter of violence. "Hurry it up!" he roared, slamming a fist against the counter. Krista's hands moved over the keypad again, deliberately slow, her mind a tightrope between fear and focus. The service door, the alley beyond. It was a slim hope, but it was hers. Mathew's warning had been a flare in the dark, and she clung to it, her resolve hardening. Whatever came next, she'd face it, not as a victim, but as the woman who'd already outrun the storm. The air in First Trust Bank was a chokehold, thick with the stench of sweat and gunpowder. Krista Adler stood before the vault, her fingers trembling over the keypad, each deliberate misstep a fragile thread holding chaos at bay. The lobby was a frozen tableau, customers huddled on the marble floor, their whimpers stifled. Tellers pressed against the counter, eyes wide with dread. Reaper, the masked leader of the Iron Vipers, loomed behind her, his skull-etched mask a specter of violence. His gun's barrel grazed her shoulder, a cold promise that quickened her pulse. "Hurry it up," he growled, his voice a guttural rasp that echoed in the vaulted ceiling. Krista's mind raced, her hazel eyes darting to the storage room's shadowed corner, where the service door to the alley waited. A lifeline she'd whispered to Tanya moments ago. Mathew Husond's voice, urgent and raw from his call, was her anchor. Get out. He was coming, she knew it, but every second stretched like a taut wire. Her fingers lingered on the keypad, inputting a wrong digit, the vault's lock beeping in protest. "It's finicky," she lied, her voice steadier than her pounding heart. "Needs a reset." Reaper's mask tilted, his silence a blade. "Don't test me, girl," he snarled, but his words carried a strange lilt, almost amused. "Your boyfriend's gonna love hearing this story." The taunt jolted her, confusion flashing across her face. Boyfriend? Did he mean Mathew? How could he know? Her stomach twisted, but she shoved the thought aside, focusing on the vault. Another slow keystroke, another beep. She was buying time, gambling on Mathew's promise, on the faint hope of sirens beyond the bank's walls. Outside in the alley's damp gloom, Mathew crouched by the service door, his breath shallow. The Atlanta morning pressed against him, humid and heavy, the distant wail of sirens a faint pulse. His leather jacket was gone, swapped for a dark hoodie, his gun a reassuring weight in his hand. Krista's whispered hint about the exit had been a beacon, guiding him through the city's maze. He'd called for SWAT, but waiting wasn't an option. Not with her inside, facing the Viper's wrath. His green eyes scanned the door's rusted lock, his lockpick working with practiced ease. The click of the tumblers was a small victory, drowned by the roar of his pulse. Inside, he slipped through the storage room, a labyrinth of crates and flickering bulbs. The muffled chaos of the lobby reached him. Reaper's shouts, a child's cry, Krista's voice, calm but strained. He edged toward the door to the main floor, peering through a crack. Krista stood at the vault, her braids swinging as she fumbled, her defiance a quiet fire. Reaper's gun was too close, his men patrolling the room like wolves. Mathew's jaw clenched, his hand tightening on his weapon. He had to move, but one wrong step could end her. Krista's eyes flicked to the storage room, a fleeting glance that caught the shadow of movement. Mathew, her breath hitched, relief flooding her veins. He was here. She pressed another key, the vault beeping again, her stall tactics wearing thin. Reaper's patience frayed, his fist slamming the counter. "Enough games!" he roared, seizing her arm, his grip bruising. She gasped, but her mind sharpened, locking onto a panel beneath the vault's keypad. A silent alarm, rarely used, its button hidden in the casing. Her free hand brushed it, a subtle press as she feigned a struggle. The alarm triggered, a mute signal to the precinct, her secret defiance. "I'm trying," she said, voice cracking, buying seconds. Mathew, watching, cursed under his breath. Reaper's grip on her was a fuse burning short. He scanned the lobby, spotting a lone Viper by the front doors, his back turned, rifle slung low. Mathew moved, silent as a ghost, slipping behind a pillar. His arm locked around the guard's neck, a swift chokehold dropping him without a sound. The rifle clattered softly, masked by Reaper's shouts. But as Mathew dragged the body into the shadows, a second Viper turned, his eyes narrowing. A shot rang out, grazing Mathew's arm, a hot sear of pain. He gritted his teeth, diving behind a counter, blood seeping through his sleeve. He pressed the wound, hiding the injury. Krista couldn't see, couldn't falter. Krista heard the shot, her heart lurching. Reaper spun, barking orders, but she kept her eyes on the vault, her fingers now moving faster. The code nearly complete. "It's opening," she said, voice tight, praying the alarm had worked. The vault's lock whirred, a final click echoing like a gunshot. Reaper shoved her aside, his men rushing to the vault, tearing open duffels to stuff cash. "Move!" he snarled, but his eyes flicked to the lobby, sensing the shift. Krista stumbled, catching Tanya's gaze. "Now!" she mouthed, nodding toward the storage room. Tanya, pale but resolute, edged backward, her hands still raised. Mathew seized the distraction, his pain a dull roar. He lunged from the shadows, tackling Reaper, the two crashing into a teller's station. Wood splintered, papers flying as Mathew's fist connected with the mask, cracking it. Reaper roared, his gun skidding across the floor. The other Vipers turned, weapons rising, but sirens screamed outside, blue-red lights pulsing through the shattered doors. SWAT was here. Krista saw Mathew's attack, her adrenaline surging. A Viper charged her, his club raised, but she grabbed a metal chair, swinging it with a cry that split the air. The chair slammed into his knees, sending him sprawling, his gun clattering away. Tanya screamed, bolting for the storage room, her footsteps a frantic echo. SWAT breached the bank, their shouts a thunderclap. "Down! Hands up!" Armored figures swarmed, rifles trained, subduing the Vipers with ruthless precision. Mathew pinned Reaper, his knee on the man's chest, until a SWAT officer cuffed him. Krista collapsed against the counter, her legs giving out, her breath ragged. Mathew was at her side in an instant, his hand steadying her, his face etched with relief. "You're okay," he said, voice hoarse, his bloodied sleeve hidden behind his back. She nodded, her eyes searching his, the chaos fading to a dull roar. The bank was a wreck, glass strewn, customers sobbing, Vipers cuffed and dragged away. Tanya emerged, trembling but safe, her eyes wide with awe. Krista's hand found Mathew's, a fleeting grip, her gratitude unspoken. The heist was over, but the weight of Reaper's taunt, "Your boyfriend," lingered, a riddle she couldn't yet unravel. As SWAT secured the scene, Krista felt the ground shift beneath her, her world forever altered by the man who'd fought to save her. Krista Adler stood in the precinct's sterile hallway, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across her face. Her navy blazer, borrowed from Naya to replace her torn work clothes, felt stiff, a poor shield against the weight of the day. Her hands, no longer trembling but unsteady, clutched a paper cup of bitter coffee, its warmth doing little to thaw the chill in her bones. The lobby's shattered glass, Reaper's skull mask, the crack of gunfire, they replayed in her mind, a relentless loop. Yet it was Mathew Husond's face, etched with relief as he'd steadied her, that anchored her now, even as questions churned beneath her calm. Officers bustled past, their radios crackling with updates, but Krista barely noticed. She'd given her statement, her voice mechanical as she recounted the vault, the service door, the chair she'd swung. Tanya, her co-worker, had hugged her tearfully before being whisked away by family. Krista was alone, waiting for Mathew, who'd vanished into a briefing room after SWAT cleared the scene. His absence gnawed at her, his cryptic warning, "Get out," still echoing, unanswered. The door swung open and Mathew emerged, his leather jacket back on, hiding the blood she hadn't seen during the chaos. His green eyes found hers, softer now, carrying a vulnerability she hadn't glimpsed before. He gestured to a quiet alcove by a window, away from the precinct's hum. "Krista," he said, his voice low, stripped of its usual sarcasm, "we need to talk." She followed, her coffee cup creasing under her grip, her heart a tight knot. The alcove's window overlooked the city, its dusk skyline a tapestry of gold and steel, but the view felt distant, unreal. "Talk then," she said, her tone edged with caution. "What was that, Mathew? You knew they were coming. How?" He leaned against the wall, his jaw tight, as if bracing for a blow. "I'm a cop, Krista," he said, the words heavy, final. "Undercover. I've been tracking the Iron Vipers for months, working my way into their world. That bar vibe, it's their hub. I'm there to listen, to gather what I can, to stop them." The confession landed like a shockwave, her breath catching. A cop. Not a bartender, not the charming rogue who teased her over cocktails, but a man living a lie. The coded messages, the shadowed arguments, his fierce protectiveness. It all snapped into focus. A puzzle solved too late. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling with hurt and anger. "All this time, every date, and you couldn't tell me?" "I wanted to," he said, stepping closer, his eyes searching hers. "That night at the cafe, I was ready to come clean. But I got word. They were hitting your bank. Telling you would have blown everything, put you in their sights." His voice cracked, raw with regret. "I couldn't risk you." Krista's chest tightened, his words a tangle of truth and pain. She thought of Nia's warning about his charm, the doubts that had flickered in quiet moments. "How do I know you're not playing me now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the ache. "How do I trust you after this?" Matthew's face fell, a rare crack in his armor. He reached for her hand, then stopped, his fist clenching. "Because I'd be dead without you," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You stalled them, Krista. You gave me time to get in, to fight. I'd die before I let anyone hurt you." His sincerity, unguarded and desperate, pierced her defenses, a lifeline in the storm of her doubt. She exhaled, her shoulders sagging, the coffee cup forgotten in her hand. "You saved us," she said, her voice softening. I forgive you." The words felt fragile, but true, a bridge over the chasm between them. His relief was palpable, a shadow lifting from his eyes, and for a moment, they stood in silence, the city's hum a distant pulse. The reprieve was short-lived. Krista's phone buzzed, a flood of notifications lighting the screen. She frowned, opening a social media app to find a grainy video spreading like wildfire. The bank heist, captured by a security camera, showing her at the vault, opening it under Reaper's gun. The caption screamed, "Teller betrays bank." Comments poured in, vicious and razor-sharp. "She's in on it. Can't trust her kind." The racist venom stung, echoing the slights she'd faced at work, in life. Her hands shook, the phone nearly slipping. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're saying I helped them." Mathew peered over her shoulder, his jaw clenching. "It's a lie," he said, his voice hard. "Someone's twisting it. Probably the Viper's network, hitting back." He pulled out his own phone, fingers flying. "I'm fixing this." Within hours, Matthew's precinct contacts leaked a SWAT report to the press, detailing Krista's bravery, her stalling, the silent alarm, her fight. News outlets pivoted, headlines shifting. Hero teller foils heist. The video's tide turned, comments now praising her courage, drowning the hate. Krista scrolled through the updates, her chest loosening, though the spotlight's glare unnerved her. "You didn't have to do that," she said, meeting his gaze. "You deserve the truth out there," he replied, his voice firm. "Not their garbage." Days later, the precinct hosted a ceremony, its auditorium packed with officers and city officials. Krista sat in the front row, her black dress a quiet contrast to the uniforms around her. Mathew stood on stage, his badge gleaming as the chief pinned a new rank to his chest. Detective. Applause thundered, but his eyes found Krista's, a silent tether. "This isn't my win," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Krista Adler's the hero here. She risked everything, her life, her safety, to stop those bastards. We owe her." The room erupted, officers standing, their cheers a wave that lifted her. Krista's cheeks burned, her smile shy but radiant, her heart swelling with a pride she hadn't felt in years. Mathew stepped down, joining her, his hand brushing hers. A promise, a vow. The ceremony faded, but their bond, forged in fire and truth, burned brighter, a spark that no lie could extinguish. The Atlanta skyline shimmered under a velvet November night, its towers ablaze with lights that mirrored the stars above. Krista Adler stood on a rooftop terrace, the city's hum a soft undercurrent to the jazz quartet playing nearby. Her emerald dress caught the breeze, its hem brushing her ankles, her loose curls swaying as she leaned against the railing. The past months had been a whirlwind, danger, truth, redemption. But tonight, with Mathew Husond's hand in hers, the world felt steady, its edges softened by possibility. Their bond, forged in chaos, had deepened into something undeniable, a quiet fire that warmed her even now. Mathew, in a tailored charcoal suit, looked every inch the man who'd captivated her, his green eyes glinting with a secret. He'd insisted on this dinner, a rare escape from his detective work and her bank shifts, promising a surprise. "You're quiet," Krista teased. He chuckled, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. "Saving my wit for the main event." His voice, warm but edged with nerves, sparked her curiosity. Before she could press, he led her to a secluded corner of the terrace, where a single lantern cast a golden glow over a small table. The quartet's melody slowed, a soulful saxophone weaving through the air. Mathew stopped, facing her, his usual swagger replaced by a vulnerability that stole her breath. "Krista," he said, his voice low, "you've changed everything." He reached into his pocket, producing a delicate silver chain, a heart-shaped pendant dangling from it, its sapphire center catching the light. "This was my mother's. She gave it to me before she passed, said it was for the one who'd make me whole again." His eyes glistened, a rare crack in his armor. "That's you." Krista's throat tightened, her fingers brushing the pendant as he clasped it around her neck. "Mathew," she whispered, but he wasn't done. "My brother Jack, he was a cop too. Died in a bust 5 years ago." His voice wavered, the pain raw. "I swore I'd never let anyone in after that. But you," he took her hands, his gaze unwavering. "You fought beside me, trusted me when I didn't deserve it. I can't lose you." He knelt, a ring glinting in his palm, its diamonds simple but radiant. "Marry me, Krista. Be my partner, my home." Tears welled in her eyes, the city blurring behind him. She'd faced down guns, lies, and hate, but this was a leap into a future she'd barely dared dream. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, Mathew." He slid the ring onto her finger, rising to pull her into a kiss, fierce and tender, the quartet's applause mingling with the crowd's cheers. Weeks later, Krista moved into Mathew's loft, a sleek space in Midtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and hardwood floors that gleamed under sunlight. Her old Corolla, retired for a sedan he'd insisted on buying, sat unused, a relic of her past life. The loft's luxury, marble counters, art-lined walls, hinted at wealth, but Krista assumed his bartender tips and detective salary funded it, unaware of the family fortune behind his name. She unpacked her books, her clothes, her dreams, the pendant now a constant at her throat, a talisman of their promise. But the world wasn't done testing her. Krista had applied for a linguistics scholarship, a step toward her dream of becoming an interpreter, a career that promised more than the bank's drudgery. The program was her ticket to a new life, but her application stalled. A rejection email arrived, citing a weak reference from her manager, Ms. Hargrove, whose bias had shadowed Krista's tenure. The words stung, a familiar echo of slights she'd endured, and despair crept in, threatening to dim her spark. Nia Carter, her roommate turned confidant, refused to let her falter. Over coffee in the loft's airy kitchen, Nia's eyes narrowed at the news. "Hargrove's playing dirty," she said, her fingers flying over her laptop. "Let me dig." Krista frowned, unsure, but Nia's tech skills, honed in her graphic design work, were a quiet weapon. By evening, Nia uncovered an email chain in the bank's server, hacked with a finesse Krista didn't question. Hargrove's reference called Krista unreliable, laced with coded prejudice, a betrayal that burned. "Got her," Nia said, grinning. She forwarded the emails to the scholarship board, attaching a glowing counter-reference from Tanya, Krista's bank ally, who'd witnessed her courage. Within days, the board reversed its decision, awarding Krista the scholarship. "You're unstoppable," Nia said, hugging her, and Krista's laughter, bright and free, filled the loft, her future reclaimed. The engagement party came on a crisp Saturday, hosted at a riverside venue with twinkling lights and a jazz trio echoing their first dates. Friends and colleagues mingled, cops from Mathew's precinct, Nia's artist crew, and Tanya with her warm smile. Krista, in a sapphire dress that matched her pendant, stood beside Mathew, his arm around her, his pride a quiet glow. The river reflected the city's skyline, a canvas of their new beginning. Nia took the microphone, her curls bouncing, her grin infectious. "To Krista," she said, raising a glass, "who outran bikers and faced down thieves, and to Mathew, who caught her heart with that smooth-talking charm. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but her voice softened. You two are proof that love can rise from chaos. Here's to your forever. Krista's eyes misted, her hand finding Mathew's, the ring a steady weight. The party swirled around them, dancing, toasts, stories, but their gaze held, a world of their own. The bank, the vipers, the lies, they were scars, fading against the promise of this night. Krista didn't know the full scope of Mathew's life, didn't suspect the wealth behind his ease, but she knew his heart, his fight, his love. As they swayed to the jazz, the river's current a mirror to their journey, she felt it. A new chapter, bold and bright, ready to unfold. The Atlanta spring bloomed with a fierce vibrancy, dogwoods painting the city in bursts of white and pink, their petals drifting like confetti on the breeze. Krista Adler navigated her days with a renewed fire, her engagement ring catching sunlight as she balanced her linguistic studies with grueling shifts at First Trust Bank. The scholarship, secured through Naya's daring hack, had opened a path to her dream of becoming an interpreter. But the bank's relentless demands, petty audits, sidelong glances from her manager, drained her, shadows creeping under her hazel eyes. Yet in Mathew Husond's midtown loft, where they now built a life, she found solace, his presence a steady flame against her exhaustion. One humid morning, over coffee in the loft's sleek kitchen, Mathew watched her with a quiet intensity. Krista, in a faded sweater, pored over a textbook, her braid fraying from a sleepless night. Her coffee sat untouched, her shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. "You're running on fumes," Mathew said, his voice gentle but firm, his detective's badge glinting on the counter. "The bank's killing you, Krista." She sighed, closing the book with a thud. "It's just temporary," she said, her voice weary. "Bills don't pay themselves, and school's not cheap." Her fingers traced the sapphire pendant at her throat, a reminder of his vow, but her smile was thin, strained. Mathew leaned forward, his green eyes locking onto hers. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, his usual wit absent, replaced by a raw sincerity. "My family, they're not just comfortable. They own half of Atlanta's real estate, old money from railroads and land deals. I joined the force to carve my path, to prove I'm more than their name." Krista blinked, her coffee cup pausing midair. "Wait, you're a billionaire?" A laugh escaped her, half disbelief, half amusement, the revelation reshaping the loft's luxury, the art, the view, in a new light. "You've been playing bartender and cop with that in your pocket?" He grinned, a flicker of his old mischief. "Didn't want you falling for the trust fund." His expression sobered. "But I see you breaking yourself for that bank, and it's gotta stop. Quit, Krista. Let me cover your tuition. Study full-time, chase that interpreter dream. You deserve it." Her laughter faded, pride warring with temptation. "I can't just take your money," she said, her voice firm. "I've always stood on my own." "You're not taking," he countered, his hand finding hers, warm and steady. "You're letting me invest in you, in us." His sincerity, fierce and unguarded, chipped away her resolve. After a long pause, she nodded, a spark reigniting in her eyes, her future suddenly boundless. Months blurred into a rhythm of study and love. Krista thrived at Georgia State, her fluency in Spanish and French sharpening, her nights free from the bank's grind. She graduated on a sunlit May afternoon, her cap tassel swinging as Mathew cheered from the stands, his pride a beacon. Her degree wasn't just a milestone, it was a key to a new world, one she'd carved beside him. Her skills found a home in the precinct's International Crime Unit, a sleek office buzzing with case files and encrypted chatter. Krista joined as a translator, decoding cartel communique from intercepted wires, her precision a quiet power. Mathew, now a seasoned detective, worked alongside her, their worlds converging. One case, a high-stakes arms deal linked to a Viper-affiliated syndicate, became their crucible. Krista pored over audio, catching a coded phrase, "La sombra cae," pinpointing a drop at an abandoned warehouse. "It's tonight," she told Mathew, her voice steady, her eyes alight with purpose. The sting unfolded under a moonless sky, the warehouse a hulking silhouette against Atlanta's industrial sprawl. Krista monitored comms from a van, her headset crackling as Mathew led the raid. "Eyes on target," he whispered, his team fanning out, shadows among crates. Krista's translations guided them, her voice a lifeline through the dark. When a deal went sour, gunfire erupted, and her heart clenched, but Mathew's calm, honed-in countless busts, held firm. He disarmed a smuggler, his cuffs clicking as SWAT secured the scene, and crates of rifles were seized. Back at the precinct, debriefed and exhilarated, they shared a look that spoke volumes. Partners in every sense, their synergy a force. Krista's work, once a dream, was now her reality. Her translations unraveling crimes across borders, her courage a mirror to Mathew's own. That weekend, they returned to Vibe Lounge, now under new management. It's neon softer, it's jazz sweeter. The bar, once a den of secrets, was a nostalgic haven, its dance floor alive with swaying couples. Krista, in a crimson dress, leaned into Mathew, his arm around her waist as they moved to a sultry trumpet melody. The pendant gleamed at her throat, a testament to their journey. "Still trouble?" she teased, her voice light, her eyes sparkling. "Only the best kind," he quipped, his grin infectious, his hand tightening on hers. Their laughter mingled with the music, a harmony born of trials and triumphs. The lounge's pulse echoed their own, a city alive with their shared spark. As they danced, Atlanta stretched beyond the windows, a canvas of light and shadow. Krista thought of the bank, the heist, the lies that had tested her. They were distant now, scars faded against the vibrancy of this life, her work, her love, her unstoppable spirit. Mathew's gaze held hers, a vow unspoken but eternal. From a frantic escape to a partnered mission, their spark had forged an unbreakable bond, a fire to light their days, now and always. As the final notes of Krista and Mathew's story fade into Atlanta's vibrant night, their journey, from a heart-pounding chase to a love forged in fire, leaves us with a spark of our own. What did you think of their tale? Did Krista's courage or Mathew's redemption steal your heart? Share your thoughts below. We're all ears. A huge thank you for joining us, for letting their story light your night. Stay tuned for more tales of grit and triumph. Until next time, keep chasing your sparks.